now. Joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, as we've talked to Geoff Mosher over the years. He is the host of the Inside the Birds podcast with Adam Kaplan and Billy Osborne, and he joins us now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Mos, another season of football, brother. What's up?
Hey, man. It is another season. Starts tonight. I'm very excited, as all of us are, for the season opener. I'm also excited about doing the podcast that I've been doing now. We've got 4 episodes in with Adam Kaplan and Billy Osborne, the Wildwood legend, South Philly legend. So it's just great to do a podcast with a guy like Adam who has so much inside knowledge. I know he's been on your station before. And, of course, Billy, who gives the player standpoint. He's been a scout in the NFL with the Chiefs. He's coached. So he really takes what we deliver, Adam and I, from kind of a news perspective, and he really breaks it down from a tape perspective and explains schemes and strategies, and it's just been an awesome deal to do the Inside the Birds podcast with those guys.
Yeah, man, and we will certainly be hearing from Geoff and those guys throughout the season. You know, Ozzy, who did the draft special show with us and has appeared on the station a bunch, I'm very intrigued, when he starts talking about some of his stories, and one might be getting ready for a season, and getting ready for a season in which, you don't have any background in is being the Super Bowl champions. How different that preparation is for these guys as opposed to becoming one of these teams that's trying to catch that team. How is that preparation different? Because, Geoff, when you're doing stuff in February and March, that timeline is probably not the same when you win the Super Bowl of your off-season workouts.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting it on the head, and it's something that we've talked with the Eagles a lot about during the OTAs and then also training camp, that the two forces that you're talking about here, one, the idea of a truncated off-season. You played so deep in the season. Your body is a little bit different than some, team players for a team that get eliminated or don't even make the playoffs or out in the first round. Then you go on the celebrity tour and you do all these things. And a lot of guys mentioned that it just felt like a shorter offseason. And then meanwhile, the 31 other teams that didn't win the Super Bowl have been zeroing in on the Eagles ever since the end of their season ended. And so you have that exactly playing out tonight, right, Mike? You have a Atlanta Falcons team that can basically look at last year and say, of all the teams that really took it to the Eagles in the postseason and made it the toughest for them to really do what they do, it was the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, 15-10, that was a fingertips catch away, or 5 yards away, if you want to call it, from the outcome being reversed, from Atlanta winning, and who knows what happens. And, history in Philadelphia is completely different. So they come in to this game with a longer off season and, having it circled on the calendar and having an idea, again, because Nick Foles is starting, of how this time around they can attack Nick Foles and the RPOs. And then obviously very hungry, while the Eagles are, and by the way, and Adam Kaplan mentioned this in the podcast, really the podcast, last one we did yesterday, Inside the Birds, that the Falcons are the only team, he looked this up right now, with nobody on IR or NFI or anything. They were completely healthy. And we know the story with the Eagles. They don't even have Carson Wentz, and they've got Tim Jernigan on NFI, and, they're down to basically Jordan Hicks as their only starting linebacker with Nigel Bradham suspended. So, once again, the underdog theme kind of comes back into play. And I think I've even seen in some websites, gambling websites, where the Falcons are now considered the favorite tonight.
Wow. Geoff Mosher, follow him at Geoff Mosher NFL to find that podcast. Geoff, your thoughts on the whole Wentz thing? I mean, I've read, some medical stuff that says that he's not going to be 100% the entire season and that he could be out a lot longer. Some people thought he might be ready for week 1. I was not really one of those guys, although I was very surprised at how he was able to move around in minicamp, training camp, but I never really was like, I think this guy's going to be ready. But is it going to be a longer wait than maybe some people suggest after seeing him?
Well, it might be. I don't know if the Eagles' plans are changed. I think what the Eagles are doing is just giving themselves as much time as possible to let that knee get stronger and stronger as it possibly can. And they feel like at this point it's probably not worth putting him out there, even though he could play today, and certainly he was ahead of schedule in the OTAs and doing 11-on-11s, and it seemed at the start of training camp that he was echoing a sentiment that he was going to be ready for September 1st. I'm sorry, for tonight, and nobody was really saying no. But it seems like they are definitely taking the, I don't want to call it conservative route, cautious a little bit. They just want to give this thing as much time. We had a chance, Adam and Billy and I, the other day to talk to Dr. David Chow, who used to be the San Diego Chargers.
Yeah, that's the article I'm referencing.
He's now in the media. What's that?
That's the article I'm referencing.
Yeah, and he wrote an article, and we spoke to him on the podcast. He's on that podcast we did yesterday. In fact, what he said is that he has no criticisms at all of how the Eagles have handled the situation, but that the reality is, and this is the guy who did Phillip Rivers' ACL surgery, and Rivers came back in what was then considered record time. He said the reality is that within any knee injury, and with Carson you've got the ACL, the LCL, and the IT band, any kind of injury like that, medically, a player cannot be considered 100% until that 12 to 18-month time frame of recovery. Mike, we're not even at what? We're not even close to 9 months or 10 months on it yet. We're still very far away. Now, he said players will come back. Adrian Pederson did it. It doesn't mean that you can't play before that. It's just that you are not technically, medically 100% until that time frame. And, the Eagles are far from that time frame. So it seems like, do I think that Carson's going to wait 12 to 18 months to get Carson on the field? No, clearly not. Obviously, he's going to play sometime this season. I think they're just giving him more time.
Geoff, this is Ryan. So everything that you just said and kind of the new stuff that we know about the timeline and how basically anything before 12 months you can really classify as a rush for Carson Wentz. What's a good week in your mind that they should bring Carson Wentz back? I mean, you don't want to risk the whole future of this guy for maybe 1 or 2 months early when you have the Super Bowl MVP sitting right there in your arms. Am I right with that?
It is. It's just difficult to really pinpoint the week. Let's say if the medical time frame to be 100% is usually a year to 18 months, then to answer your question from a technical standpoint, we would say, well, week 15 is somewhere in that December 13 to 15 range when it's been a year. But you and I both know the Eagles are most likely going to start him way before that. So at that point, it really just becomes about, I don't want to call it arbitrary, but it really just becomes about the team, coaching staff, and medical staff's comfort with where Carson's at. Not to say that they're uncomfortable with him right now. I think that the one thing you hear from doctors is that the longer you wait, the stronger it gets. So you're asking the $1 million question. Is it just 1 week? Is it 4 weeks? I really don't know. And they'll tell you that it doesn't depend on how Nick Foles plays or whether he plays well or not. You would love to be a fly on the wall in the meeting room, though, if Nick really struggles and Carson's looking fine. So I don't think it's going to be longer than 4 weeks. I don't know that it's going to be 2, though, either.
Let me ask you this real quick. Do you feel that, one, Carson is disappointed that he's not – I mean, obviously, but that he let them down? And do you think that Pederson felt in his heart of hearts that Carson was going to be ready? Or do you think they were sidetracked or railroaded by the fact that the doctor said, look, man, he's just not clear? Do you think they and Pederson and Carson were kind of anticipating being cleared for this, or do you think they kind of knew deep down this is unrealistic?
Mike, I think that everybody involved with this is reasonable, and I think they all understand the timeline and the acceleration here and what Carson was able to do earlier than expected. So I think what I would say is I think that because they're reasonable people, I think it's easy to get over the fact that he's not going to be starting here because it's just such a quick return. But on the flip side, the one thing about Carson, and this goes beyond his injury, it's just about him as a person. When I talk to people within the organization about Carson, he has just this ability to convince people, and who would doubt him at this point, right, that he knows the way, he knows what he's doing, he's going to work hard, and that he's kind of like that guy that just lifts everybody around him, not just in the locker room, but the entire franchise. There's no doubt about it that the fate of the Eagles changed the day they drafted Carson Wentz. And even though Nick Foles won the Super Bowl, we all know that Carson Wentz got them that first-round playoff bye that they needed and home field advantage. Carson has the ability to just convince everybody around him that what he says is gospel and what he does is right. And Carson took the bull by the horns on his comeback, and I had people in the organization telling me that they were amazed by how quickly, and this is back in February, March, how quickly he was coming along, and that it wouldn't surprise them that he started on September 1st. So I think that's why there was this pull to really want to kind of rally behind Carson. I keep saying September 1st. That's not what I'm saying. September 6th. There's this pull around Carson that people were rooting for him to succeed, and here he is busting his butt. But when it gets closer to the day and closer to the day, and you start to bring in the medics and the reality of the situation, I think everybody understands that, if it's 1 or 2 weeks, it's worth it in order to make sure that this guy is preserved for the next 10 or more years.
Jeff, how do you think Doug is
disappointment? I think there is disappointment on Carson's level, just from personal, but I don't think he's mad per se at anybody for making this decision.
Right.
I agree with that. I just wondered, if he felt like, man, I let these guys down because I really thought I'd be ready. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, how do you think Doug's handled this situation? Because in my mind, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, he had a plan, obviously, going into the preseason, leading up to Game 1. He's had multiple, I'll call them temper tantrums to be a little bit dramatic, but he's had a few different outbursts with the media on the Wentz timeline question. He comes out one day and says, I'm bringing this thing all the way up to an hour and a half before game time if I have to. Then 24 hours later, he goes back on his word and says, no, I'm announcing the starter. It's Nick Foles. I mean, he's been all over the place. He's had a lack of patience at times. He's been surprisingly frustrated with the Philly media, who he knows very well, asking obvious questions about the franchise quarterback. So, having said all that, how do you view Doug Pederson and how he handled this whole situation?
I think the tantrum, as you called it, or whatever you want to call it, that happened the other day, is basically boiled down to that he wanted to be able to tell his quarterbacks the deal. And obviously it got leaked by Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network before he reported the quarterbacks. That made him mad, and I think he had to, almost in defense of his quarterbacks and in defense of his own coaching style, kind of lash out at the media. And honestly, he painted with a broad brush. And to be honest with you, if I were to guess, and I don't like to guess other reporter sources, but I would have to think that the NFL Network reporter, Ian Rappaport, probably got that from guys inside the NovaCare complex, maybe some front office types. So, if anything, it might have been misplaced anger. If you want, make sure you keep your in-house tight before you're yelling at media, most of whom are just rewriting the report from the NFL Network, which, by the way, is owned by the NFL. So I just think that he needed to show a stoic face. Well, not stoic, but he needed to show an angry face to the media because he didn't have a chance to tell his quarterback himself what was probably already known with inside the NovaCare.
Geoff Mosher.
But I don't think he's changed much. I don't think he's changed that much. I do think that he is trying to get this team, as we talked about with the first question, right? He's just trying to get this team focused on winning games and avoiding outside noise. So I think that was his way of kind of bring it all on me and let's take the focus away from the guys and the championship banner and all this opening night stuff.
Geoff Mosher at Geoff Mosher NFL to find his Inside the Birds podcast with Adam Kaplan and Billy Osborne. Jeff, real quick, your key tonight and your pick for tonight's game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I know a lot of people think it's low-scoring, but it's very warm. I think the helmet-leading penalty might come into play, and some poor tackling might lead to some big plays. So I picked the Eagles to win. I think I did on the podcast 26-21.
26-21. Don't forget, pick the perfect score tonight at 5:30. We're starting at $100. Remember, every week no one guesses the score. That money rolls over, and we'll see if we can get a winner tonight. Jeff, of course, doing the Inside the Birds podcast, but also tell the listeners where they can find your writing work now.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for letting me say that. Really excited to announce kind of a new venture using Patreon.com, which is a great website that allows you to get paid for your own content to cover the Eagles. It's kind of an independent subscription-based style. So I'll be covering the Eagles for Patreon. It's patreon.com/Geoff Mosher. A subscription is $2. It's $1.99 a month. So we're talking about less than $25 a year, which is like 6 cents a day. And I've been covering the team for almost 15 years. I have a lot of connections. I plan to write a lot of strategical stuff, formation groups, strategy, coach inside knowledge, things that are going on behind the scenes, good stories, not just the regurgitated quotes that you can get anywhere on the internet. I'm really taking a deep dive. I'll be doing game breakdowns. Ozzy's going to help me out with those on the All 22. So it's going to be a ton of really good in-depth stuff that you're not getting anywhere for just $25 a year, $1.99 a month. You sign up at patreon.com/Geoff Mosher. And for every 100 subscriptions, Mike, I get, I'm donating $10 to the Wounded Warrior Project. You know, it's a foundation that helps veterans and service members who suffer injuries or certain traumas that need a financial assistance or care. So not only do you get great Eagles coverage if you sign up to my website, but you are donating to a very, very worthy cause.
Very cool. And we'll be talking to Geoff throughout this season. You'll hear some more of Geoff around. And, of course, check him out on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL for his Inside the Birds podcast. And patreon.com/Geoff Mosher. It's $1.99. If you liked our conversation, you'll get a lot more right there. Geoff, we look forward to another season with you, man.
Guys, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.